Thank you all for coming. We're going to get into a really interesting conversation. We're going to talk about mobile journey marketing, what that means across the spectrum of the industry. I want to welcome my esteemed panelists to the stage, and we're going to get started. All right, guys, so welcome. Thank you for coming to Mobile Journey Marketing. Thank you for bringing your ideas. I want to start by having everybody introduce themselves, give a little bit of your background, contextualize who you are and why you're here.
Yeah, I'll start. My name is Maggie Mesa. I'm the Vice President of Mobile Business Development at OpenX. OpenX is a leading programmatic exchange across multiple channels globally. We monetize publishers' inventory programmatically. We have now layered on our open audience product, which enables people-based marketing for the open web.
Awesome.
Cool. I'm Adam Williams, also known as Sven, CEO of Takumi. We're an influencer marketing service. We connect brands with quality influencers, but we do it at scale, just on Instagram, I should say.
Just on Instagram, great. Kevin.
I'm Kevin Fitzgerald. I'm the head of insights for the US at Oguri. Oguri is a mobile technology company that specializes in user choice. So essentially what we do is connect brands and agencies to consented users on our platform to make for a more qualified connection and qualified messaging opportunity.
Awesome. Well, thank you all for coming. We're going to get into, we want this to be a debate, right? We want this to be not your classic panel where I'm going to ask questions and get a bunch of responses. But I do want to talk about, in particular, an issue that a lot of people are kind of discussing. It's definitely been on other panels around the CCPA, which is obviously, in a lot of people's view, the California Privacy Protection Act, and how that the actual impact that has, considering that a number of you are global companies, and you obviously have worked around GDPR and you're compliant with it. I know at Advertising Week we are a globally GDPR compliant company, and through that, I'm wondering if we're overblowing a state-specific consumer and advertising law, if we all are just sort of centering around a European law. Maggie, love to start with you.
Yeah, similarly, OpenX is a global company, so we are GDPR compliant. So in that regard, CCPA is not as stringent as the GDPR that took effect last year. So from that position, OpenX is going to be CCPA compliant. I think to your point though around, are we overthinking this? Are Californians being strange and weird as we are? No, I think. Look, I'll say this. I think consumers are, getting more educated and smarter around their data and their privacy.
Sure.
I think to that extent, though, CCPA is just the beginning, and in my opinion, what will likely be a federal law. And I think it'll be the first step, right? Nevada's up next, and I think perhaps Maine is after that. I'm bad at this, but nonetheless, I think it'll likely be a federal law. And I think from our perspective, our core customer group, our publishers, they're likely to build for California, knowing that it'll become federal, right? Because they don't want to do work 50 different times, right? They're going to do it once for the most strict law and hope that covers them for all the other states.
Great. Kevin, Adam.
Yeah, for us, yes, we're GDPR compliant. We're also sort of headquartered in the UK, so it's something that's quite natural for us. For us, I think it's just making sure if there are any nuances to it, to make sure that we are doing the right thing in the right markets in the right states. But I think it's really important, and I think you're right. I think it will become sort of commonplace, especially because all the big media companies already have to do it if they're global at all. So actually, it just means forcing some of the smaller players or the more local players to actually have to live up to those higher standards, which can be scary, can be a bit worrying, but actually it's the right thing to do. I think people should do it.
Amazing.
Yeah, I would tend to agree. I think that we're not overlooking the CCPA or GDPR at all, because I think that outside of being just a legislation, it's truly a materialization of what consumers are saying they want, right? They want to be able to understand how their data is being collected and then how it's being implemented, whether that's for marketing purposes or otherwise. So I think CCPA is a drop in a bucket of a larger first or next step, as Maggie was saying. But in terms of being overlooked, I definitely don't think so. Especially coming from a company, similarly founded in the UK, coming from the EU. We are GDPR compliant, and it's kind of baked into not only the ethos, but the way we actually conduct business. Everything that we implement is starting with that consent and starting with that connection to an individual user. So it's kind of been the backbone of our brand and our company moving forward. So we're actually lean in and excited to see that it's starting to snowball and catch more ground in pop culture.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I think this is an inflection point for technology, is that this concept of consent by design is at the offset of whatever you're building as a technology company. We'll need to have a consent by design, in my opinion, policy, right? Versus the opposite, which is, for those of us that have been in digital advertising a long time, we never talked about regulation,
Right.
ever, ever. I can't think of a panel in which I talked about regulation until the last 18 months. So, we're growing up as an industry, so there's pros and cons of that. But I do think it's going to be good for the future of technology and for consumers specifically.
Yeah, I mean, the whole idea of regulation, I mean, coming from the ad tech community myself and working at ad networks for a number of years, and basically the whole concept of black box and skirting, things in the name of great results. Was something that was never questioned. And I think obviously brand safety and in particular consumer safety has really sort of risen. I want to talk quickly about the name of this session and challenge it a bit on why we don't want this to just be called digital journey marketing, because the concept of mobile marketing is something that, in my view, connotates that it is a secondary device or a secondary screen, when in fact consumer behavior has led us to now it be the first device that we use. Are we just in an age of digital first omni-channel, and so therefore the concept of calling out the power of mobile or the year of mobile, as we've been hearing forever, is not necessary anymore, and we really need to be talking about data, personalization, audience, more than anything else? I think we are, but we obviously as an industry we still pull mobile out for some reason. What do you think that reason is, Kevin?
Yeah, I mean, I think that today it still does need and require a specific call out, because I think consumers at large interact with this media channel differently than any other media channel before. I think that the true nature of it being an extension of a consumer or our arms requires that extra degree of personalization. I think from a marketing perspective, gone are the days that we're making decisions based off of what magazines people are reading or what television shows they're watching, and we're actually relying on real-time, consumer behaviors to kind of guide what decisions we're making. And those behaviors, we tell our devices and we tell our mobile more about us than any other channel before. So I think it does beg a little bit of a unique call out in the overarching media mix, because I think that's truly where you have insight into who a person is and who the human is behind a screen.
Yeah, I would challenge that a little bit, although I agree with generally what you're saying. I think marketers think of mobile as a bespoke channel for a lot of reasons, because all of what they, from a measurement and attribution standpoint, everything is built for web, right, or display. So whether it be video or mobile or CTV, marketers generally sort of have these separate funnels. And I think that is, to your point, a benefit for mobile that is highly personal, right? My mobile device knows the most about me. But can also be a con, I think, and that's really what's been a challenge for mobile. Going back to the beginning of it is marketers not understanding how consumers are using their mobile devices, because they are so personal, right? So I think there's pros and cons to that, and I personally feel like my mobile device is my only device at this point, because I don't have a personal laptop anymore. I just use my work computer and then my mobile device. But I would say there's two sides to that, which is that I think as an industry, if we saw everything from an identity perspective, I think we would all benefit from that a little bit, or certainly the ecosystem, the mobile like supply ecosystem one, and they would see dollars shift from linear, from other forms of digital advertising, because we're all we're the same person, whether I'm on my work laptop or on my smart TV or obviously on my mobile device.
I mean, from my perspective, I actually think you should call it as a separate device because that's how we use it. I think you might be special in the person who's got rid of your laptop, because I think everyone I know still has a laptop. Some of them
I
still
still have a
desktop.
laptop, kind of.
But I think it's more about where it will go, and I think it
Yeah.
needs to go into eventually goes into a single view of an individual, and it's about where you use it. Because some days I'm hardly using my mobile, and other times I'm only using it. And so I think we need to be able to at least just be able to follow the person where they are. That's for me.
I think that when we're talking about omni-channel, I think the first thing that gets thought of is ad delivery. And I think that that's where the two facets of this conversation are. So ad delivery, consumers are everywhere, right? They're interacting with a multitude of media channels, a fragmented universe, accessing information everywhere. However, my point about mobile being called out specifically, I think that one facet that sometimes goes to the back burner is actually being human or user-centric, and I think that we have the opportunity to learn about a user on the mobile device more so than on any other media channels, and then use that information that we know about them and disperse that information to connect with them in other platforms. So I don't want it to be a cop-out answer, it's almost both. Calling it out as an opportunity to learn about the human that uses it, but also using that information to inform potentially other levers within a marketing plan.
Do you think marketers consider Facebook a mobile company?
No.
Right, that's crazy, right? When all their revenues, or not all, but whatever, I haven't looked at their most recent earnings call, but 90% of the revenue is likely mobile apps specifically, not mobile web.
Adam, how do you feel about that? Because your business is an influencer content creation channel via Instagram. So tell us a little bit about, like, do you view Facebook as a mobile company specifically, given your connection?
I think we do. I just think the interaction, especially on Instagram, it's even more.
Should, yeah.
Like it's where the consumer is. It's the constant viewing of it, and they can do that wherever they like. So yeah, very much we see them as a mobile company. But I don't know if I think that makes them any different from if they were just a normal company.
Sure.
But we sort of like obviously have to work very, very sort of like closely with them, and then any of those developments that they do is something that we look into closely.
I want to come back to you a little bit and talk about what was just sort of when you are a business that basically you start from the mobile lens entirely. Yeah. Kevin's business starts from everything. Your business starts omni-channel. It goes across different things. Do you find that because of where you start, you have a little bit more of an understanding of why we need to be continually like focusing on this topic versus making it a broader topic when we're talking about audience?
For me, I think it's slightly semantics.
Yeah.
I think it's like, it's the business, it's where the consumer is. And especially within influence marketing, it's all actually about the influencer and their audience and where they are and what they're doing. And I think that's the wonderful thing about influencer marketing, is that actually the influencer's the creative power, they're the one controlling it. So it doesn't matter where it is. So very few people actually go and look at Instagram on sort of like on a desktop. Generally, they're all scrapers, and that's the only way that works. But it's, I don't think it's a particular issue or a challenge even, actually. But we do work very hard just trying to understand how the audience of those influencers is consuming and using that content.
Interesting. Maggie, OpenX started as a supply-side platform, and recently they've talked about themselves as a people-based marketing platform, a pretty significant shift. When we talk about the need to get away from device-centric and we talk about the need to market to people versus market to where they are, or market where they are but focus on the individual versus the device, how can you as a business make that shift and gain legitimacy in the market given your history?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's fantastic that OpenX is so well known for what was essentially our core business, which was our display programmatic exchange. Kudos to our marketing team over the years and the folks that built the business. In the last, 3 to 5 years, we've built a significant footprint in mobile, where it's 50% of our exchange, and forging into CTV. And to your point around, and that was sort of why I posed a question around Facebook, because first of all, there's no right answer. I have no idea. I'm always curious how marketers think of the walled gardens in general. But the way that we sort of see the world is that, right, when 60% of consumers' time are spent off the walled gardens, but 60% of digital ad spend is going to the walled gardens, something is off, right? And all of us in the outside of the walled gardens in the open web are discounting consumers when they're not, on Facebook or Google or et cetera, right? And so this is definitely something that we think about because we have a footprint across all devices, right? And adding value and helping marketers target users the way that Facebook and other walled gardens do in resolving on an identity, right? And not a cookie or specific device ID, I think brings huge value to all of us, especially as we consume content off of walled gardens, which I think is also critical, especially in this climate.
Kevin, I definitely want to get the reason why I'm doing this a little bit is because Shift and then Ogilvy starts as a data-first mobile identity company. So it's almost as if, a lot of the established players in the space are kind of collapsing and finding different places for them to create incredible value. How do you see that as a company like OpenX coming into a space that you're very familiar with?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think that we would be remiss to kind of ignore the consent piece when we talk about people-based marketing. So one of the things that is truly, like I think I was alluding to earlier, is foundational for us is before we're looking into any kind of data observation or collection or creating that relationship with the consumer, we approach them with an opportunity to consent into that relationship. So, when we talk about walled gardens or outside of walled gardens, we know that consumers are omnipresent and erratic nowadays, right? Access to information all over the place. And being able to connect with them, whether that content is in a walled garden or outside of that, should still foundationally start with their thumbs up and agreement to enter that relationship. So I do think that being able to see across all of these different environments is critical in understanding what is most important to a user or to a consumer or to us up here. But I think where the industry kind of has to go as a whole, especially as we continue to, you mentioned the year of mobile. I feel like we've been talking so much about people-based marketing over the past couple of years and have been kind of ignoring the people until having conversations around GDPR, around CCPA. So starting to shift the conversation from being data-informed people marketing to more choice-driven people-based marketing, I think is really important.
Awesome.
Yeah, the consumers have to be aware of the value exchange, right? That's going to be what this next life cycle for all of us in the advertising industry is understanding the life cycle of whether it's paywalls or subscription models or ad-supported models, what is that value exchange for the consumer? And I would say that's the one thing we learned with GDPR is that consumers aren't clear on what that value exchange is yet for them.
I want to shift topics a little bit, and I want to talk about something that certainly at Advertising Week globally, we've been hearing bubble up to the surface, obviously because of its implications for all of mobility in general, is what's happening with 5G and its effect on marketing. So recently at Advertising Week APAC, there was a ton of content that focused on why 5G is more than just something that talks about speed. And on the consumer side, there's a lot of implications. People talk about, 5G means that when realized, we won't have phones. We will have, everything will be of such granular size that wearables will be the new thing, or embeddables will really take up to the next level. As an industry that generally has focused on the idea of some sort of screen, what do we really know, and understand what the implication is for 5G and marketing? Or are we all just grabbing at vapor, trying to guess? Because as a platform that is just about pushing out thought leadership and ideas, it doesn't really. We're there to embrace it from our seat. I'm really curious about what you guys think and how you can embrace or not embrace. Start with you, Maggie.
Oh, with me, okay.
Yeah. He's like, don't ask me that question.
I was like, I just answered the consent one. I took that one. No, truthfully, I think this isn't maybe the most controversial position to take on 5G, but I feel like at the last 2 years at MWC, 5G was like the big announcement. Like, this is going to change the industry, right? And like, nothing has changed dramatically for anyone in this room who. So from an advertising ecosystem, you're right. Like right now, all we talk about is speed. Truthfully, I think it starts with, again, the consumer. The consumer is a little bit unaware of like how 5G is going to impact their life, or what technologies it'll impact and infrastructure will impact. There's so many questions out there. To me, it feels like a little bit like the hype and the myth of blockchain. Mm-hmm. Like, this is going to be the year of blockchain. This will be the year of 5G.
Right. Adam, what's your?
So I definitely think it will enable a load more technology. I think there definitely will be something around wearables, and some things you just won't need a screen for. But however, actually, like flicking through a magazine, we're very visual people. So like, you'll still want to go and find content, and actually it'll allow you to do the long form content really, really well. And so I think it will just give us new opportunities. But I don't think we're ever going to lose a screen. Like, it might then be the rollout one or the folded one or whatever it might be in the end. But there will still be some screen of some description, be that in glasses or however. But we'll still want to ingest content in some way.
And through that, marketing doesn't change. Like, what I'm trying to figure out is how does technology disrupt marketing? And it sounds like what we're saying is like, no, the screen remains, it becomes more flexible, it becomes a different type of thing, but it doesn't really change the core value of how
I think we'll lose some of it. I think we'll lose, potentially we'll just lose some of the crap advertising, because you just won't, it won't be right for the environment or for technology. But
I would agree with that. It's just the environments will slightly change.
Yeah.
I think that's the sort of natural segue, but I would agree with you. I don't think screens will go away. It will introduce new ways of, engaging with consumers.
Yeah, and I think that you asked to not acknowledge speed, but I'm going to ignore that because I think that it's actually a foundational and simple thing for consumers to latch onto for something that's still been talked about, Maggie, to your point, for the last 3 or 4 years, and is still super ambiguous. Yeah. But everyone out there, if we asked the room what 5G meant, it'd be like, my phone's going to be faster. I could download a video in 4 seconds. Yeah. And, not necessarily just sticking on to speed, but what I think that's going to do is create for a culture of adaptation, whether that is with technology disruption, if that means we have no more screens, right? And I think that how that's going to impact us is similar to what we're talking about with privacy and meeting the consumer on their playing field right now today, is that we're going to have to be on that playing field and kind of easing and being a partner to these users on a personal level during that adaptation phase. Because I think that, again, the access is going to fuel personalization. And I think the relevance and personalization that we've been talking about now and this whole entire week is just going to be amplified times 1,000. Mm-hmm. So being able to connect, again, foundationally with users based on their needs and wants, and creating that consented one-to-one relationship with them, even in an environment that becomes faster and becomes crazier and becomes technologically disruptive, I think is still a foundational element that we're going to need to solve today before 5G rolls out.
So I am intimately understand what Ogury does, and you talk about a lot about consent. Mm-hmm. Your business sort of starts with putting the person first, ensuring that you have opt-ins across the board. Basically, the whole concept of privacy by design, the whole concept of really sort of starting with consumer protection. Mm-hmm. When we have individuals that basically are consistently losing trust in brands, how do companies across the board here, how do we as an industry ensure that we get the data that we need in order to make people's experiences better, while also not losing the overall trust that they have because they feel like there's an ulterior motive behind everything that we do? As someone that's been in advertising for a long time, and obviously having a lot of friends outside of advertising, a lot of the times when you have a conversation, they'll be like, "Oh man, I hate advertising." Like, and I get that because, and I work at Advertising Week, so that doesn't really work out too well when you're like, "Oh, well, I work at Advertising Week." But I'm really curious how do we have our cake and eat it too in this situation? Do we all have to rule under strict guidelines? We also have marketers that don't care, that are like, "Oh no, it's cool. We're a DR black box. That's our strategy. We push product through." Really curious about how that works in influencer marketing as well, where some of those things are not as important. But want to start with you, Kevin, because I know that that's sort of intimate to what your business is built off of.
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think that it is the next step of providing an opportunity for a user to consent is providing an opportunity for them to voice their choice, right? So one thing that we're putting into market is the opportunity, well, first of all, take a step back, is we up here and we in this room have a kind of obligation to work with not only brands and agencies, but also users and end consumers to educate them on the idea that the internet or content isn't free and somehow it's being monetized. So when I say the idea of choice is we want to first educate consumers that in one way or another you will pay for this game or this news article or what have you. Give them the choice to choose if they want to pay for that content and potentially have a ad-free experience like a Spotify Premium or something of that nature. Give them the opportunity to consent in a data observation relationship with potential marketers to have a more tailored or and relevant experience while they use and consume that content, or neither of those and have a cluttered, more frequent, less tailored, potentially more annoying ad experience. But in providing choice, we're providing the opportunity to educate them that there is a 50-50 in a give and take relationship. And you talked about trust, and I think the idea of trust is foundational, starting with choice and letting them create their own decision when they opt in or they pay, I think is at least the best step one to creating a trusted relationship rather than a kind of opaque or blinded one.
Yeah. From influencer marketing, because this actually runs on, we just released a white paper, so we got a lot of stats and facts about this. But trust is the core thing that people are sort of really worried about, and certainly the consumer. But sort of one of the things we see is that actually it's all about authenticity, which drives trust. So you've got to be able to trust what you see on the screen. But I also think we have to remember that actually most of the time that we've actually got really savvy consumers. They understand what's going on. They can see when something's an ad. So if it's not being signposted properly, like #ad, they pretty much know. They know that you're doing something dodgy. And something like 64% of people on our survey said that actually they would start unfollowing people if they were not signposting stuff properly. And then there was another one that I thought was even more sort of special, where it was like 78% of people said that they would unfollow someone if an influencer was being unrealistic or posting something that was sort of like unrealistic body images or unrealistic lifestyle. And so actually people start being able to make that choice because you go, actually, I just don't want to see that content. Okay, on Instagram, they can't stop seeing the ads, so the much more targeted part. But from the influencer point of view, actually you can go, you know what, I don't believe in that. But that's also why I think it's so important that we allow and we make sure influencers know the rules, but allow them to get on and do the creativity that they want, because actually that's what builds trust. Because like a lot of these followers actually spend a lot of time with the influencers. Like they see their posts every single day. Quite often probably know more about them than quite a few of their mates, because actually your mates you don't see every day and you don't always see them posting or speak to them. And so they really build up a relationship. So for me, trust is core to all purchasing consideration, whatever it might be, because if you trust a brand, then you're more likely to buy it.
Maggie, last year, OpenX had a whole campaign around trust. It was like everything. You guys had a New York Times article about trust. Now you're a people-based marketing company as well. So I'm really curious, like, of your opinion on this, given that like trust is core to your business. You're also going into a more elevated role into the ecosystem around marketing to specific people. How does that? Does anything change for you at all as you guys make that shift? Do you have to like overcome things that you didn't anticipate you did before, or were you guys ready to go for this from the beginning?
No, I mean, I think we've incorporated it from the get-go of our open audience product, right? I think everyone up here is spot on, which is that the consumer has to, give consent, opt in, right, and understand what they're getting in return for giving you their data. And we are 100%, consent-driven company, GDPR compliant, CCPA compliant. So that is the backbone of our product, and that's why we feel like we can step into this new, or adding data and identity into our programmatic exchange. But I do think that, to your point, consumers are smart and savvy and becoming even more savvy, and so we are all having to elevate ourselves to ensure, right, all technology companies, that they keep that in mind, because 18 months ago when GDPR entered the European market, people just left. Like, dozens of tech companies just left the market.
Right.
They're like, we cannot invest in this. We don't have either the money or the resources, or don't want to, because we know what it'll mean for our business, and they just left, right? So you see us going in the opposite direction of that, which is investing heavily in people-based marketing, because we do know that we are a 100% consent-driven company. So, but I mean, I don't want to be hyperbolic. I don't know how many tech companies will leave the U.S. But that being said, it will challenge tech companies. Somebody will get a fine. Obviously, Google will, because they already have 17 different fines going. But somebody else will.
Yeah, and I mean, we've had. I remember when GDPR came down in Europe, and we had a number of partners where their offices just totally shuttered. They were gone. They were like, "Sorry, we're gone," and that was the end. I mean, there was no other story to be had. And I wonder if it's because of the size of market, we're going to see a drastic drop off of, especially the mid-tier players that haven't really risen, or just quick consolidation to like save face.
I mean, look, part of this regulation is just to get the bad actors out, because the cost of supporting GDPR was not insignificant, right? So to build, to support, to be GDPR compliant cost a lot of money. I was on a panel with Ari Paparo, and he was sort of, as he does, lovely, like ranting about how much he spent on supporting GDPR. And I know a lot of tech companies felt that way. But that is essentially the new ad tech tax for technology companies, right? Is to be aware of consumers' desire for privacy,
right,
and build to that from the offset, versus having to go back and build for that, right? I would, guess that there will definitely be some companies that consolidate or struggle with this as we enter 2020.
Before I move on to the next question, I just want to let everybody know you can ask questions through Slido. So if there's any burning questions that people want to ask, please go ahead and do that as we sort of near the tail end of the panel. I want to talk about a piece of technology. It's like a little bit of a throwback question, because we're talking about mobility, around the concept of location. And you can't talk about mobile journey marketing without talking about location. So I used to work for a company called Shopkick. It was based off of the idea that beacon technology was the future of location-based marketing. Adam, you and I talked about the fact that you were at Verve as well. And then, not that it died, but there was like all of this stuff talking about like, this is how we fix the accuracy problem. This is how we fix, being able to track the right individual and give them personalized experiences. It spoke to data, it spoke to location, it spoke to ad format, it spoke to everything. And then it like hit a bubble, and then it kind of fizzled out. It didn't die, but it fizzled out to the point where you don't hear about it. And I know that there's scale challenges, but I'm really curious about, because everybody comes from a really mobile background, what your opinion is about that specific technology as a marketing channel. What happened and why, when we think about 5G changed things, even though that's a way bigger thing. But really curious.
Yeah, I mean, I think that beacons and location in general kind of play less or more minimal of a role in mobile journey marketing, because I think that you're only capitalizing or capturing behavior that's more impulsive in nature. So from a beacon standpoint, capturing like point of sale or at shelf. And while there's a ton of decision making that runs through a consumer's head before they actually pick up that product and go to the cash register for it, you're only isolating that point in time to switch their decision making in, that moment. Whereas I think mobile journey marketing is more so the opportunity to observe real-time behaviors, whether that is research of a product or, reading reviews or being, social and talking to, their networks about it or what have you. And I think why Beacons potentially hit a bubble is just that, having a myopic view of consumer behavior and thinking that conversion only happens at shelf or only happens within a 2-mile radius of a store, I think is a little narrow focused. And I think the mobile journey or the journey in general is far larger and far deeper.
Adam?
When I was at Verve there, you could see how they were trying to stick a load of this data together. In the end, I think it's hard to sort of like really be able to pinpoint what's causing it. But also I think there's probably just a hardware issue. Like it's expensive and it changes on a constant basis. There are definitely stores who just use it for their own data. So rather than it trying to be sort of actually sort of like a much wider thing, they just want to track who's coming into their stores, where they're actually going, and actually doing a little bit more clever analysis about the store and shopping habits rather than a bigger, wider scale, sort of like let's have a broad view of what people are doing.
Yeah, I would just piggyback off. You're both spot on and correct. And on the flip side with marketers, it's all about reach and frequency for them. And with such small scale and adoption of that technology in that moment, marketers shifting spend to any type of technology platform that was enabling Beacon technology solely was probably unlikely or a challenge at the very least. Marketers are also sort of reticent to shift spend until they know that there's full scale of an audience, right? And I can't imagine they ever reach that point with Beacon technology alone.
Okay, I don't think we're gonna get any questions, so I'm gonna ask my final question. It's a layup, but you get to think on the fly. What is the number one challenge facing mobile moving forward as a channel or as not a channel, and what is the number one opportunity as a key takeaway? I like to end everything with key takeaways for the audience. We'll start with you, Maggie. Oh, wow, wait.
Curveball.
Last second entry before. Now everybody knows what the last question is, so we'll start with this question. So we will ask this question. Do you think that more purchases will be made on mobile devices through social media channels? Adam? We'll start with you.
Yes, absolutely.
Yes.
But we're already seeing it. So like, what is it? 60% of 16 to 24-year-olds in the US are doing exactly that. Like, it's being pushed by influencers. Actually, I think it's 91% is being pushed through just social channels in general. Like, it's a huge number. And like, why wouldn't it be if you're spending 90% of your time on that? And also the experiences are becoming better. And you look at any of the social channels, like they're becoming more shoppable. And I even believe like Instagram potentially is going to challenge on certain categories Amazon. Like the ability to be able to really shop and go, you know what, actually I love that look, or all 5 of those bits of that sort of influencer's style, the belt, the dress, the boots, or whatever, you'll be able to buy it instantly. And like even if our sort of like office is a straw poll, they're buying a lot of stuff through Instagram.
Yeah, I mean, just look at the massive growth of D2C brands. I know that your more traditional marketers are, I wouldn't use the word scared, but they're certainly aware and watching, and more than watching, leaning in, trying to develop their own D2C brands if they can, and or acquiring D2C brands, right? I think that your more traditional marketers have absolutely identified the fact that consumers are buying through social channels, but they're not buying their brands through social channels, right? I don't know what's on your Instagram feed. I won't judge anyone here. But the ads that I see are largely D2C brands, right? NSF, there's a company called Rothy's, super popular. It seems like every 5 seconds I get a Rothy's ad. I also have friends work there, so that's probably why I get it, because I click on all the ads and I look around. But nonetheless, I just think that there's this intersection of how consumers want to engage with brands and social that marketers and mobile can't ignore. So I personally think, again, I would agree that was completely accurate. I think we'll just continue to see purchases shift through social channels.
Agree.
Yeah.
There we go.
That was a
Yeah,
layup,
I mean,
right?
That was that was a layup.
I think
Alright.
it's social, but also mobile. We're seeing stats across the board,
Right.
inside and outside of social. But I think, I mean, as adoption and usage and all of those, numbers continue to increase, definitely.
Okay. Number one challenge, number one opportunity. Maggie.
For mobile.
Yes.
Okay.
Going back to the last question before the last question.
The last question before the last
Right.
question. I continue to think that mobile is just a massive growth area. I think consumers and the ecosystem that I work in is really on the publisher side. So I work with developers, and my team works with developers. I just think there's continually new and engaging ways to bring content onto your mobile device. I think about what Instagram was 5 years ago and how much it has changed. And I still continue to think there will be new ways in which developers can bring content onto your mobile device and engage with them there.
For me, I think go for the biggest challenge is maintaining trust, because I think there's like obviously Cambridge Analytica and all that sort of stuff like really dented it. Didn't stop Instagram or Facebook growing at a ridiculous rate still, but I think that like maintaining that trust is the most important. But I also then think that's the biggest opportunity. If we can make sure that we manage the process, that we protect the consumer and they understand and they're educated about it, I think that's the biggest opportunity for brands, because actually, like, if you trust a brand, you want to buy it, you want to wear it, eat it, whatever it might be.
Sure.
Yeah, no, I really agree. I think I have a similar answer, but more so about consumer choice. I think that as an industry, we have a daunting challenge ahead of us to kind of meet these consumers and meet the needs that, the regulations and privacy legislation are materializations of those needs. But it's going to pose for the biggest opportunity, because giving, I should say, users the opportunity to choose how they interact with brands, how their data is shared, giving them the opportunity to be educated on their data as a currency will provide a huge opportunity for marketers to create more meaningful relationships with their potential customers, but also more efficiencies within their buy. And an environment where we have less annoying ads and more personalization and connection between brands and consumers.
Awesome. Guys, thank you so much for the time and bringing your ideas and thoughts, and thank you, audience, for sticking around. There's drinks right outside for people to just kick back and enjoy the day. I'm sure all of you are ready. And see you all tomorrow. Thanks so much.
Thanks very much.